So, welcome back, friends. And if you joined us during the meditation, welcome to our practice period today at Insight Community of the Desert. And really glad that you are here. And just wondering after your practice period, as you took that break, what you might have noticed. And maybe you noticed some internal settling. Maybe the mind was a little stiller, a little more calm, a little more relaxed. The world around us is exactly the same, or more or less the same 30 minutes later. But there might be a difference in how we're relating in this moment after practice to our experience. And I also want to say it might not feel that way, which is totally okay. So it's really helpful for me to look at the process of liberating mind and heart as something that happens outside of time, so that I don't get too caught up in a sort of striving that's motivated by craving or impatience. And I often take solace when I'm thinking my practice should be going faster, with the knowledge that it took the Buddha countless lifetimes of practice before he became the Buddha, the fully enlightened one. So I try not to measure my practice in little bits or single sits, but rather in a long arc. Am I seeing some effects over time? And am I enjoying the practice? And then I can allow that my movement toward freedom is happening as it should. Having some confidence and faith in this path, and some confidence that I can actually follow this path. And I brought in the topic of relaxation as we moved into the sit. And I think that's so important because this path is really all about relaxing. And that isn't always made clear. We think in terms so often of prescriptives and efforts and practices. And the most important practice is skillful relaxation, relaxing into our experience, relaxing into these practices that support, relaxing into this process of liberation. So it's really helpful to remember that this aspect of ease and relaxation, that this is actually integral to the teachings. This isn't something we're adding now in 21st century Western Buddhism. This is part of the Dharma that the Buddha taught. And I start here because when we begin talking about concentration, that word concentration, we often get the sense of tightness or efforting or willing. That image that a lot of us might carry in our heads of the meditator who is seemingly still and at peace, but how much is there a sense maybe that underneath that calm exterior, there is a willing going on, or even a rigidity, an efforting? And do we bring that as an overlay to our own practice, even unconsciously? So that can be a place of inquiry for us. What does a meditator look like to me? What do they do? What are they actually doing? How do they hold themselves? What's going on in there? Is there self-judgment, for me, like as I compare myself to that image inside, or to what I think is happening for others as they practice? Sometimes I sat at retreats and, kind of noticed people being so looking like they're just having amazing meditations. And, I'm kind of back in grade school taking a time test, looking around the room and, oh, that person just put down their pencil and now they're taking their test to the teacher and I've still got all of these questions to go. So concentrate, Ian, concentrate. And that is not what the teachings are about when they invoke the power of concentration, the faculty and the power of samadhi. So in about 8 years of giving Dharma talks, I have never given one on concentration or samadhi. And so it's great to get a chance to do that because it's absolutely essential to the path. And samadhi is the Pali word that gets translated as concentration, Pali being the language that the Buddha's early scriptures were written down in. And samadhi comes from sama and dati, putting together, collecting. And, for those of us who have been coming to Dharma talks for a while, we know samadhi appears again and again in the Buddha's teachings. It's the place on the Eightfold Path that directly supports wisdom. It's one of the 7 factors of enlightenment that supports equanimity. It's one of the 5 powers that we balance in our practice: faith and energy and mindfulness and concentration and wisdom. So understanding it, cultivating it, knowing how it arises is really essential to our path if we're following the Buddha's teachings. So it can help to think about it and notice how we relate. First of all, how we relate to the word, what it brings up. If there's resistance or if there's ease in our hearts toward this concept, towards this place on the path. So samadhi has the sense of coming together, of bringing together. And there's a peacefulness in that, not a squeezing together or a forcing, but a gathering in. One analogy that I like is the way you might gently gather in the bubbles on the surface of your bathwater. Just a very gentle touch. Or maybe it's like gathering in little fluffy chicks really gently. Here, little ones. Here, little ones. And some other translations that you can play with to see what helps you feel into this this state of samadhi are collectedness, stability of mind and heart, composure, unification, steadiness, attentiveness, non-distractedness, steady awareness, calmness, gatheredness. So all of these point to the state of samadhi, and sometimes I think it's very helpful once we know some of the many ways that a Pali term might be translated to then actually use that Pali word instead of the translation, because we create a new relationship with it, one that is fresh and experiential, one that we're inquiring and learning from. So I want to talk a little bit about why samadhi is important, why it's one of the 5 powers, why it's essential to the Eightfold Path, why it's a factor of enlightenment. And then really importantly, how does it arise? What supports the appearance of samadhi in my practice? And how do I know I'm experiencing it? So that's what we'll talk a bit about tonight. And I just wanted to say that one of the beautiful things about the Dharma and teaching the Dharma and learning the Dharma is that we express differently depending on our experience, our culture, our identities. And so you can come to retreats or meetings like this, or go online or read books, and you'll hear talks on the same Dharma expressed in so many different ways. And some of them will land for you and others may not so much. And so this can be another place to relax into, trusting your own heart, your own wisdom to receive what's helpful for you. So we might even bring in this energy of faith or sada, that these teachings have been passed down and expressed in so many different ways over 2,600 years. And there is something essential within the teachings that gets presented, offered through the lenses of different times and places and cultures. Beautiful analogy for that I heard in Seattle a number of years ago from a Tibetan teacher was same water, different vessels, but the same water, the same Dharma, the same taste. So we know that it's possible to do the kind of concentrating, like when I was taking that test, that is tight and forced, but we can only do it for a while. Like, I have to take this test or get my taxes done or whatever it is. And so we concentrate in that sort of gripped, uncomfortable, brittle way. And it works for a time. It can be a useful tool, but it doesn't last very long. It falls apart and we tend to feel tired from it. So, what we're really looking for in the practice is something that is sustainable, something that comes from ease and joy rather than fear or gripping or some external force. So, whenever I'm with a Dharma group like this, I know I'm very likely to be with a group of very creative people. Lots of artists and writers and musicians and thinkers and caregivers and creators and teachers of all kinds. And so it may be that in your creative expressions that you've experienced those organic moments of collectedness, of attentiveness. Maybe you're an athlete or a dancer or a musician, and there are those moments, when you're so with the piece of music that you're playing, or so with the body as it moves in space, that there's a beautiful feeling of collectedness, of oneness. Like, I am not even doing it so much as it's happening. Or maybe you're observing nature, a beetle lumbering across the desert floor, or a rabbit sitting still, sniffing the air and listening in the morning. There are these moments that we all experience where there is a play of easy effort and full attention or presence, a sort of knowing responsiveness of the mind and body and heart. And there's ease in that. That's not that kind of brittle concentration. That's a lovely, beautiful, organic collectedness and gatheredness. That's the flavor of samadhi. And in that flavor, there isn't forcing or willing. There is that flavor of ease, though. And really importantly, there is also a flavor of love. And when there is love, presence is possible. And when you're in that flow state, it's easy to see clearly. And this is why we practice to support the mind state of samadhi, because there isn't a lot of clutter in it. There's the object or experience, there's clear awareness of what is being known, and there's a certain unhindered relaxation in the knowing that makes it possible to relate to what our experience is in a direct and skillful way. And so in that kind of field, there is the possibility to see clearly with wisdom, with insight, with a heart and mind that is focused, still, equanimous. And you can see why this is, because the more stillness that we have access to, the more clearly we can see whether we're meditating or doing anything in our lives. So some of you remember Larry Yang, our first guiding teacher at Insight Community of the Desert, and I was at the very first Dharma talk that Larry gave to us, and Larry walked in with a jar filled with water and sediment, and he shook it up and he placed it on the table beside him. And so of course it was very murky and opaque. And as he gave his talk, of course, the sediment settled over time and the water became clear. And he offered that as a way of showing what the practice of mindfulness does. As we practice, the hindrances become weaker, the mind settles, and in that settling, there is some clarity. And in the clarity is where we find wisdom. So it's a good image, I think, often of what we're doing when we practice. Or if we compare ourselves to a jar of sediment and water, it's like we get shaken up a lot during the days, almost every day. And then when does the jar get a chance to settle? We may have to be intentional about that and decide, I'm going to practice now. And so what happens, when we put the jar down, letting it rest, letting it settle, and then looking at what's here as though through clear water. So the sense of settling, collecting, becoming still, that's also samadhi. And I venture to say that dominant culture is not a fan of this at all. As dominant culture, consumer culture, fear culture wants for us to be scattered and confused and uncollected, undiscerning, uneasy, mistrustful, and separated. And we're given all the tools and all the support imaginable for a scattered mind and heart. The devices, social media, propaganda, the constant struggle to survive in an extractive system in a world that doesn't value stillness because there's no profit in it. Because when we're still, and this is the point of the practice, when we're collected, when there is samadhi, then we have the capacity to see clearly, to see through systems of oppression and lies, the ones that we swim in and the ones that we've internalized. We see, as the Buddha, suffering and the end of suffering. And in that clear seeing is wisdom. And the more that people are connected to wisdom, and the more people that are connected to wisdom, the greater the threat to the systems of oppression. So in this kind of practice, we reassert our own stewardship and care of our own minds and hearts. That's really what we're doing here. And there is ease in this practice. And also there is effort and energy. That's part of it. But it can be a joyful effort and energy, not that tightness. And persistent practice encouraging the mind and heart again and again and again in the direction of alert relaxation, staying present, coming back. This is what supports the mind to become collected, still, persistent, and sharp, able to cut through delusion with wisdom. I wanted to show you the Bodhisattva Manjushri. And Manjushri has a sword that is sharpened by wisdom, or sharpened by concentration. And that very concentrated, sharp sword is what's able to cut through delusion, cut through what entangles us. And so when we're doing samadhi practice, when we're collecting the mind and becoming concentrated, we're sharpening the sword of Manjushri. And the Buddha often spoke of mindfulness and shamatha, which are the calming practices, resulting in a mind that is focused, clear, sharp, bright, malleable, wieldy, and attained to imperturbability. And then we turn such a mind to the knowledge and vision of things as they are. In other words, using our collected, steady, and supple minds to investigate reality and experience and free, in a way that's free from the overlay of our usual distractions and concerns. So the mind is still, but it's sharp. So what supports samadhi? How does it grow in us? What can I do to create the conditions for this faculty to strengthen? How do I support its arising? So you're already doing it. Because when you come into a meeting like ours and choose to practice, you are taking refuge in this ancient way of awareness. You're choosing for a time to intentionally associate with wakefulness, to loosen the grasping and clinging, and instead committing to caring. And your intentions in doing that, again, like, I'm 100% sure your intentions are full of integrity. And integrity is really important, and I want to talk about it for a minute. And each of us has our own practice of integrity and ethics, what the Buddha called sila, that supports us in our lives and our relations. And that sila is a deep support for movement toward liberation. We may not always grasp how deep that is. In many places in the suttas, the Buddha taught how integrity is essential, foundational, and how it leads us all the way to complete freedom. And there's a sutta that I like very much, and it's called the Satana Sutta. And I want to read it because it offers this progression that takes us to samadhi and beyond, all the way to enlightenment. And it rests on the foundation of integrity. And so the Buddha is addressing the monastics. And he says, monastics, an ethical person who has fulfilled ethical conduct, need not make a wish, may I have no regrets. It's only natural that an ethical person has no regrets. When you have no regrets, you need not make a wish, may I feel joyful ease. It's only natural that joyful ease springs up when you have no regrets. When you feel joyful ease, you need not make a wish, may I experience rapture. It's only natural that rapture arises when you're joyful. When your mind is full of rapture, you need not make a wish, may my body become tranquil. It's only natural that your body becomes tranquil when your mind is full of rapture. When your body is tranquil, you need not make a wish, may I feel bliss. It's only natural to feel bliss when your body is tranquil. When you feel bliss, you need not make a wish, may my mind be immersed in samadhi. It's only natural for the mind to become immersed in samadhi when you feel bliss. When your mind is immersed in samadhi, you need not make a wish, may I truly know and see. It's only natural to truly know and see when your mind is immersed in samadhi. And it goes a few steps beyond that. And it ends with, when you're dispassionate, you need not make a wish, may I realize the knowledge and vision of freedom, which is a synonym for full awakening or enlightenment. It's only natural to realize the knowledge and vision of freedom when you're dispassionate. And so, monastics, good qualities flow on and fill up from one to the other, from going from the near shore to the far shore. And I love this teaching because it's really telling us that as people who care, who are committed to non-harming, to non-hatred, that we're already on the path. We've got a beautiful foundation, that we are inclining toward liberation, and that it's the natural movement of a loving, caring heart to freedom. So this is why we never give up. And this is why we don't need to force concentration or collectedness, but instead remember our sila, that ethical integrity, appreciate it in ourselves and others. Let it gladden our minds and hearts. And this gladdening the mind and heart is so important, just as important as relaxing the body. And so in addition to remembering our ethical integrity, we can gladden the mind by remembering the three refuges, if that speaks to us, the Buddha, the Dharma, the sangha. By recollecting generous acts, our own and those of others, whatever gives us faith and confidence. We can remember our beautiful qualities, or the beautiful qualities of those that we love, or our mentors, or our spiritual guides. We can gladden the mind by practicing metta, loving kindness. Whenever I begin a personal meditation period, I always spend a few minutes offering metta. Maybe it's just 2 or 3 minutes at the beginning, but always for yourself and then extending to others. You can gladden the mind through gratitude for the good that you are experiencing or have experienced, feeling grateful for your own efforts and practice. So you can look at these as the preliminaries for concentration practice, that ethical integrity. And I want to emphasize that that doesn't mean that everything in the past has to have been perfect and that your ethical integrity has always just been so amazing. But instead, right now, how is your integrity right now? How is your sila right now? Let that be the foundation, because that's all that's important. You can only go from right now. And then inviting in gladness and appreciation. And then with that foundation, resourcing you, supporting you, and resting into that support, allowing the faith of that sada to arouse the energy, virya, that leads to mindfulness. And mindfulness then leads to concentration, and concentration then leads to wisdom. And mindfulness and of body and breath are especially effective in supporting collectedness. That's why we practice with them. You know, that's the reason they seem to work pretty well for a lot of folks. And we, even as we might choose to stay with the breath or another object as samadhi grows, we're not erecting a wall against anything, because that's where the tightness comes in again. The world goes on around us as it does, the mind even thinking its thoughts. What goes on around the anchor point, that gathering place, isn't wrong, but we might choose not to get on the ride of the various thought trains that are pulling in and out of the station. I wonder if I should change jobs, or I'd really like to have a conversation with that person, or thinking about the latest season of some show we like. We might see the thought and choose not to get on that particular ride. We might choose not to embellish it, but instead choose to stay with something more simple and ordinary, like the movement of breath in the body, the warmth of my hands touching, the support of earth. And as we experience that, we might notice an aliveness in the present moment that's actually quite pleasant. And so there can be some joy in the practice. And so then it's like a feedback loop. Pleasant feeling leads to an easing of tension in the body and the mind and the heart, and more pleasant feeling and more ease. And there's a whole calming of the mind-body system that leads to collectedness, to samadhi, this unification of heart and mind. And then that collected mind becomes a sensitive instrument for really knowing and seeing things as they are. So we talked about the ethical piece, gladdening the mind through appreciation, metta, remembering our sila, resting with the body and mind, aware, caringly, noticing when we might be getting on that train, and we all do. And so, you know what? I didn't mean to do this right now. And it's a magic train. You can alert the conductor the minute you notice, and wherever you get off the train is exactly right. And the movement of coming back again and again to what is right here. All of these support the gathering of awareness, collectedness, samadhi, that supports clear seeing. And remembering that the gathering of attention is a gradual process, that there's a continuum of samadhi. It may start with just some, oh yeah, I can stay collected for a few breaths, and then, oh, I can stay collected for a few minutes sometimes. And maybe we have a still meditation period where we were actually present for pretty much all of it. And then maybe we experience, momentary concentration where awareness remains as the objects change and we rest with the flow. Or we might experience what are called jhana states that are increasingly still, collected and equanimous, very, very concentrated and yet easeful, healing. And they can be very, very, very helpful in their power to hold that jar of muddy water still. But there has to be love in the practice. So the Buddha practiced all kinds of austerities, literally starving himself and efforting so hard that he almost died from lack of nutrition and exhaustion. And he said, he would touch his navel and he would feel the bones of his spine. He was so thin and malnourished. And he realized, no, this isn't the way to freedom. And then he remembered a time as a child where his family was involved in a harvest festival, and he was lying in the shade of a rose apple tree, which sounds very lovely. And he was relaxed and peaceful, and a spontaneous and pleasurable experience of samadhi arose for him, not from austerities or extreme efforts. And so he decided to practice with this approach instead, not harsh, but gentle, kind, and sustainable. And this practice is the one that supported his enlightenment experience. And some of us, me, are so impatient and tired of our pain and wanting relief, which is totally understandable, that we just think we can power through it. And there has to be ease and gentleness and love present in our samadhi practice. So in 2019, I was up at Dhammadena on a self-retreat in the summer in July, which is like breathtakingly hot. And Arina, who was my teacher, wasn't there. And there was a temporary caretaker who was gone a lot. And I was practicing deep concentration states. I was practicing the jhanas. And I was pushing myself so hard because I was determined to reach a state that I had experienced on another retreat. But there was no ease in my practice, just that dry, brittle sort of effort, forcing myself on the schedule, not eating enough, not connecting with anyone, literally punishing myself, practicing without the support of sangha or a teacher or really any kind of friend. And I don't really need to go into the details of the experience, but what I can tell you from that experience is that without love, without tenderness, without wonder, without awe, without delight, we're not setting up the sort of samadhi, wise samadhi, that can heal, that can free us. And so about a week into my self-retreat, Arina, who was my teacher at the time, came back to Dhammadena, the retreat center, and I went to see her for an interview, and I told her what I'd been doing. And she said to me in her voice, her lovely voice, renounce that sort of practice. Renounce that sort of practice. Wow, I thought that's pretty strong, Arina. But she could see there was no love in it. And without that caring, it isn't a practice that's going to lead anywhere beneficial. And so during the week before she came back, I had been placing paving stones along the edge of a pathway up there. And it was sort of my yogi job, my contribution for the time I was there. And Arina encouraged me to continue with that and to do metta and to go for walks and to ease up on the trying to get someplace. And so that was my practice. Every day choosing the 12 stones I was going to place, noticing how they could fit together in what to me seemed the most beautiful way in regards to their shape and shade and what each stone needed as a support since they all had different thicknesses. How to make this really simple task an offering of love, a concentration practice of love. And that for me was right samadhi at that time. And that's how I've learned that love has to be present in the practice. And so I was up there for a retreat a few weeks ago, and when I would walk the land and I would see that someone had been arranging stones on the desert floor or making designs in the sand with a stick, I smiled because I saw it again. I saw it again. I saw the love in it. And where there is love, true presence is possible. So let's just take a moment to allow some of those many words to settle. And just trusting that what's good for you to keep, you'll keep, and what you don't need, it's all right to let go. Thank you for your kind attention, and love to open the space for any comments or questions or anything you might like to share or ask. Okay. Well, I thought we would close. I'll share the screen, and just because there's so much need for peace and healing in the world right now, that there always is, but we're especially aware and tender around that. I wanted to offer the beautiful benediction or poem or sharing of the merit called For All Beings by Zenju Earthland Manuel. And we've often offered this at the end of our meetings. And Zenju Earthland Manuel is an African American Zen priest and poet and writer. And when she wrote this, she wrote it after the 2016 election. And she said, "These are the times that we have been practicing for." And that struck me because I kept practicing with her poem and often sharing it. And every year, every time I share it, it's true. These are the times that we are practicing for. So I'm going to put it on the screen, and then if we were all in person, we'd be in sync and we could say it out loud together, but because of Zoom, it doesn't work so well. So if you would stay muted, that would probably be for the best, and I'll read it. But if you want to read it at home in your voice, please do. And I'll share it right now if I can do that. Oh, wow. That was a big lead up for. Hang on just one moment. Okay. I know I have it. Just if you wouldn't mind waiting a second more. Okay, we're not going to do that because it will take me too long to find it, and but we will do it next time. I have a new computer, and it isn't quite doing the things that my old computer did in exactly the same way. So let's just take a moment to feel inward again, and to feel the desire of our hearts that there be peace in this world, and that our practice together as a sangha, as a community, may in some way help a little to heal the pain in the world. And taking the wider view, the Mahayana view, we can know that our practice is of great benefit and that it can truly touch all beings, that we can share the merit of our practice with all beings, wherever they may be, whoever they may be. May there be peace for all beings. May all beings be safe. May all beings be loved. May all beings be truly cared for. May all beings be awake. So, thank you so much, friends, for being here and practicing the way of awareness and love. And I hope you have a beautiful week, whatever your plans might be, and hope to see you and practice with you again soon. All right, take care.